Hello everyone, just a quick announcement before we start with our video. I come to a conclusion that our road with YouTube is going to end. And I have very, very good reasons why I've done it, why I made that decision. And if you want to know why I made the decision, I did make half an hour video which is available on Rumble, and I will leave a link for the reasons why we're leaving YouTube in the description. Please go there, please have a look at it, and please come over to Rumble as well, because from the middle of August 2024, not a single, not one new video will come out on YouTube. All the new videos will go over to Rumble, where we have a lot more freedom of speech. But the good news is we will leave all the videos which we've recorded until the middle of August 2024 will still be available on YouTube like always. It's only the new ones are going over to Rumble. And I will give you links how to get to the channel at that site. It's in all the descriptions already. It's been there for more than 2 years. And the decision is final. Unless something dramatic happens, I just cannot see me changing my mind. And that's the news. So let us carry on and enjoy this video. Thank you for being here. God bless.
Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Legacy, and say hello to Tiger. This is my new cat. I got him this morning. And he has to sit here on my lap. The poor thing is, I don't know, not old, very young. But the workers found him at the building site, and his mom sort of abandoned him. And so I couldn't say no, call me Mr. Weak. And I've always been a dog person. I just want to tell this. I don't know where this comes from, but now we have 2 cats. We have this little one, Tiger, and we got Little Bear. Same story. Little Bear found us, or Rebecca. And yeah, so he's going to sit here quietly on my lap, and I hope he doesn't disturb you people. But we've got a guest here, and I'm very excited to have this guest, Peter Metcalfe. And he was in the paratroopers, and he was at the place where I was too, a few years later, called Katima Mulilo. And man, this is going to be fascinating, because we've been speaking on the phone now and then, WhatsApp, and I can tell you, here's a man who knows about life. And I'm going to ask him also the same question, of course, which I asked all the paratroopers, but I'll leave that to the end. But just to prepare you, Peter, I'm not setting you up, is that I want to know if parachute wings do something for a woman. I mean, you're a man who were married 49 years before your wife passed last year. Our condolences, we're with you in prayer. Is it true? Perhaps you can tell us now, and then tell us where you come from and how you ended up in the paratroopers.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, wherever you are. Wonderful to be here. But before I start, Chris, may I just allow me to dedicate this conversation to my family. And my one daughter kept pushing me to tell my story. And I kept responding that there was nothing to tell. And I recently watched one of your programs, the legacy programs, from a legacy card holder called Dominee Dr. Elof, who tells this story of how difficult it is to actually build a puzzle if you don't have the bigger picture of the puzzle. And it was that episode of Legacy that converted me to, as my daughter requested, tell my story. Let's just get back to the wings. What do wings do? Now, in my conversation, I'm going to be touching on this, but I used to be part and parcel of a number of what we refer to as glamour hoppies, glamour jumps, if you want to call it that. And that's the time when the military or the parabats would take us to it'll either be a show, a landbou tentoonstelling, an agricultural show, or a school fete or something like that. And we would jump to demo what it's like jumping from an aeroplane. So But we like to refer to it as a glamour hobby, because when you're on the ground and you pack your parachutes away and you walk through the crowd, the girls would just adore you. So I hope that answers your question. Funny enough, when I married my wife, she never even knew that I was a paratrooper, because there were certain things that you shared with your wife, but not all of it. But I trust that what I'm going to be adding to legacy will fit into the bigger picture, maybe just as one small piece of the puzzle, but it will add value to the bigger picture. Because I was born in 1949 in Cape Town, and it goes back some, but my childhood background was a bit rough, because things didn't work out well for the family, and I ended up in an orphanage in Wimberg, just about 100 k's north of Bloemfontein, and spent quite a number of years there. And I just wanted to mention that I had 96 brothers and 60 odd sisters. So we had a big family, and managing a family of that size demanded utmost discipline. And then, of course, an extremely tight schedule. Everything was done by the bell and by the clock, and you knew exactly when that bell goes off, this is what's expected from you. So that was from the staff side. But from our side, as children, every day was a process of survival. Mental survival, physical survival, because I can't remember a day that we weren't hungry. If you follow my drift, it was always a battle to get from day to day. And hence the fact, the reason why I'm telling you is because it's going to form a great part of the reason why I joined certain things. But if in that environment, if you showed any weakness, you pay the price. You would be abused, or whatever the case may be. So you weren't allowed to show. And I wasn't a big guy. I was small, but I saw my way through. Anyway, things developed. I went to high school, and one of the greatest things that I always enjoyed was the school cadets. And I ended up playing in the band and in the school cadets. And in my final year in matric, I actually won 3 awards, and it was best cadet, best drummer, and best trumpeter. So there was no doubt that I had a military passion in me. I matriculated in 1967. I declined a bursary to go to university because I was keen to get my military behind my back. And I received my call-up papers early 1967, and I was actually drafted to 1 SAI in Oudtshoorn. And I then also, we had to report to the drill hall in Joubert Park in Joburg, where we were then taken to Park Station or Joburg Station and then sent down to Oudtshoorn. And that was my childhood. So that already that day, I was quite excited that I'm going to the army. Weird, but I was. And we ended up in Oudtshoorn the next day. It was chaotic, but when we got to Oudtshoorn, it was in mid-April 1968. If I can, it might be a fraction out of the dates, but generally it's quite correct. But I had absolutely no problem with the discipline that was enforced. Obviously, due to 14 years, 12 years in an orphanage, it was common sense to me. And I ran through basics. I was fit, didn't have a problem with smoking. And the one thing that I didn't like is that we were called roofs, scabs, rover. And that was your nickname during basics, the first. And then obviously once you finished that basic training, you became a blauwgat or a blue ass. And then when you got 3 months to go, because those years we only did 9 months training. So we would, then you would become an Oman. But I wanted to get closer to Winburg somehow. I wanted to get closer home. And I saw an opportunity when the Parabats came around to recruit volunteers to join the Parabats. And Staff Pep and Staff Smitty, they had huge moustaches. Huge things, and they were so proud of these moustaches. And they arrived in Oudtshoorn and ran us through a number of tests and fitness issues, and I passed. I got selected to, and within that same week after in Oudtshoorn, and let me just share with you that we got beaten up in Oudtshoorn. They really, those 3 weeks of basic training, or the first 3 weeks of basic training, it was all just about breaking the spirit, so to speak. And but about 30 of us, 40 of us, I can't remember exactly, passed from Oudtshoorn, passed the test, and within that week we rocked up at number 1 Parachute Battalion. And this battalion opened my life. A whole different environment happened. And on the picture that you can see that was the front entrance to the Parachute Battalion. And to the left of the picture was our arch enemies, SDB, the Panzer guys, the guys that drove around in tanks while we had to walk. And then on the left, on the right-hand side of the picture that you can see was one military hospital, or the military hospital. I can't remember if it was one, but it was the military hospital. And it was very fitting because we would fight with the SDB guys and end up in hospital right next door. So we had looked for a fight in the one side and go to the hospital on the other side. So it was quite convenient for us to have this hospital there. But in around March 68, when we arrived at Rooiplaas. I call it Rooiplaas because that was the red farm. And we were obviously then re-kitted and reissued, and we got those wonderful boots. I always used to call them wonderful boots, those jumping boots. And we were then, which I found quite strange, but we were given the option to decide whether or not we wanted to, what part of the military, because you must remember, we now in a battalion, and we weren't all riflemen. And but I was given, and I like referring to the HQ as cooks, medics, and bottle washers, but not quite in that. But the HQ was always blamed for that. But in the Parabats, it was different. They asked, and you were given the option, so you could be a paratrooper. But it might be that, like in my case, I opted to become a signaller. I always had a passion for communication and radios. It was wonderful. We didn't even know about TV those days, and but what also impressed me was when we settled in, we were told on the parade ground, we were told that our title as a roof or a scab disappears. As from now, when you join the Parabats, you are a junior. And when you get your wings, you become a senior. So that was quite fun. And I felt good about that, quite proud. But we were around 180 volunteers, if I can call it that, joined the paratroopers. And they told us the very first day that we mustn't even consider the fact that all of us are going to make it. Only a handful is going to really get there. And so help me, they thinned us out very quickly. I'm not sure, but our numbers declined, and I think by the time we were ready to move into the training, the PT, the 2 weeks of PT training, where you then go through the qualification phase, the different issues that you need to pass or succeed in, like the 2.4 and the jump and the scalp draw, the carrying your buddy, etc. But our numbers dwindled down to 110, and that was even before we started. So from 180 down to 110 before we even started the selection, the fitness selection. And it was quite fun because it really separated the boys from the boys, if you can understand. You either made it or you didn't make it. And I need to just mention something here which is quite classic. When we did after the 2 weeks training, PT training now, we did the physical tests. And during my 2 weeks training, I never had a problem. I passed every single one of them. In fact, climbing the rope, for example, I could do a jackknife without you. I didn't have to use my feet. I could pull myself up without full kick. And what was impressive is the day that we did the test course, I couldn't climb the wall. And it was a compulsory test that you had to pass the wall. And yeah, the most remarkable thing that happened, and they all knew, all the PFs, let's call them PFs, like Smitty and these guys, they all knew that I'd passed. The OC, Vivier, went and he bent down in front of the wall and showed me to come. And he allowed me to step on his back to clear the wall. And he just said to the instructor, he says, he passed. Nothing else. But by now I was also highly trained in my radio communication as a signaler. And radio communication in those days was a scarce commodity. You had to effectively send people with a cleft sticks with a note in to get a message across. But we were given radios, and obviously you're familiar with the FM. It has to be in sight to get communication. And then we had the VHF, which was where I specialized in. And then, of course, all the other issues that go with signaling, the batteries and the components. And just as a matter of interest, this VHS radio that we were using weighed 17 kilos. So over and above your kit that you had to carry, I still had to carry a 17-kilo radio. But the radio was light. It was the damn battery that was so heavy. So because anyway, I don't want. But after the PT, another bunch of the guys were RTU sent home, and then we started with the hangar training. And I'm very proud to say that Staff Kitching is a legend. Was our and I'd like we used to call it our stick instructor. And the stick was the number of people that would jump out the aircraft, and he would also become a dispatcher, etc. And those 3 weeks of PT training, or rather hangar training, was all about mental preparedness, and of course being trained to do the right thing. And I remember, and I can tell you, my first jump was somewhere in July, mid-July. I can't remember the day, but what I do remember is the exact time, because the dispatcher had his left arm at the opening of the door, and all I can remember was seeing the time, and it was 7:05 in the morning, and it was freezing cold, and that's all I remember. The next thing I remember, I was jumping on the ground saying, I'm alive, I'm alive. So that was the true life of what really went there. But I remember the time. I don't even know what day it was. But I'm putting a picture of the ARCAS, and I think a lot of guys would appreciate the ARCAS. And I don't know where that little mascot comes from, the little bokkie that's running around there. But we had many a moment in that ARCAS, or the monkey cage, or whatever you want to call it. And a lot of sweat and tears was born from that. However, 60 of us got our wings. And I will never forget just one incident during our training in the hangar. We were drilled in our mind to say, exit the aircraft. So you exit the aircraft. Now you're swinging in the ropes inside the hangar. And then the drill will come to say, parachute develops, carry on. And then you go through the normal rigmarole. Or they would say, parachute does not develop, carry on. So now you're swinging. And then you got to look up, parachute does not develop. Then you got to get your emergency chute ready. You got to pull the lever. And then the part of the drill is you got to save the handle that you've just pulled. Then and then you help the parachute up and then, or out, and then you land. But now we calculated, because we weren't stupid, we calculated to open the parachute takes so many seconds, and depending on what height you jump. And then we knew that in active service, we're going to be jumping at 400 feet, which is just, yeah. So you look up, parachute does not develop. And what do you do now? So I was in the swings, and Kitching says, parachute does not develop. And I go, our Father, which art in heaven, as I'm swinging. And I don't know if you've heard of the marbles. We had these concrete blocks, and I carved my name on one of them, of course, but that was my wife, my mother, my whatever you wanted it to be was in that block. And for the next 2 days in hangar training, I had to do everything with that block because of my comment on the emergency chute. But we got our wings, and I must admit, the night after my night jump, when I looked at my wings, I wondered gently in the back of my mind if it was worth it. Yeah, all this effort was worth it. But it was. I felt I was extremely proud, and more so when I went back to the orphanage to go and show them my wings when I could. It was a big moment. But then we moved into some very heavy specialist training. We were obviously much more respected because we were now seniors, and we were much lesser in numbers and respected. I'll never forget, outside the Parachute Battalion, there was a little get-together place called Rondies, and it's where they showed movies, etc. And what was fascinating is that Rondies could seat, I would reckon, about 80, maybe 100 soldiers, people. And there were 3 aisles, one in the middle and one on each side. And the left-hand or the right-hand side of the movie house belonged to the paratroopers. The rest of the movie house belonged to Tempe, the whole of the military. But the ones, and we would often just send one guy to go and sit in Rondies and then the other troops would have to stand in the aisles, but the seats are empty, just with the one crew. And nobody dared to take over because there was a respect. There was a sign of respect that the people, that those wings gave you. Now you can understand why the girls loved those wings so much. But our training that then followed was extremely intensive. And again, we lost some of our guys that just couldn't make it. And in fact, sadly, we lost a guy because of a freak accident after he landed. Just as a matter of interest, one of the first things you do when you land is the guys tend to get rid of the chin strap that is pulled so tight when they prepare you to exit the aircraft. And so you land, and inevitably, if you do a good landing, your feet get tangled in the rig lines because you roll over it, so to speak. And a wind came up, a freak wind, a whirlwind, picked him up. He had already loosened his helmet, and he was bounced around on the the drop zone, and sadly didn't make it. And then others were guys break ankles and things like that. So we ended up with a smallish group, if I can say that, that ended up going through the whole training phase. I would reckon around 40 maybe. But what had happened is in this training that we were now going into, we were looking at, one, quick reaction. How quick can we get from A to B in an emergency? And two, survival. Would we able to survive in that? And then a few of us were also trained, and we were almost handpicked, but we were trained in how to do interrogation, and also how to react when interrogated. And it took me a while long to figure out, where is this going to fit in? What the hell have they got in mind that I don't know about yet? But and it was useful, but very tough. We would split into two groups, and the one would become the interrogator, and the other one would be who's got to get away. And we always used to joke, well, if you want to interrogate me, you've got to find me first. And so that was the fun part, and sometimes they couldn't find you, so there was nothing to interrogate. And that was the ultimate, and that played in my role, quite, because being interrogated was tough, because the guys want to see if they can break you, and vice versa. But there was some heavy ruckus with a particular survival course that we were sent on. We had to walk from Pongola Dam or Jusini Dam to Cozy Bay. It's some 120 odd kilometers. It's a long walk. And especially there, because those days there was nothing. Couple of rural villages, but water was scarce. And we were dropped off in little groups, because they also wanted us to spread out over the area and find Maorana, Dacha, the old Maorana, because the locals were actually, and I found that quite amusing, because most of the paratroopers were using this stuff. Never mind, now we got to go and look for it. But fortunately, I didn't smoke, and I never needed to smoke that stuff. But the guys, it was a habit of theirs or whatever. But we then agreed. We were full kitted, and they decided to give us live ammunition, because in most of the training we did, we never carried live ammunition. And you'd be surprised how much 40 rounds of the R1 and 2 or 3 hand grenades, it adds. And then I've still got the radio. So we all agreed as a team that no matter how they break us up, it's going to take us about 30, 36, maybe even 40 hours to walk and do some inspections from Josini Dam to Cozy Bay. And they gave us 1 ration pack each, which was in fact a meal on its own, just 1 meal. And it was filthy hot. It was that and the humidity was bad. But it took our little group around 20 or 26 hours, and we reached Cozy Bay. Somewhat dehydrated, because we thought you'd just find water on the way, and we didn't. And hungry, obviously, and with very little sleep. And when we got to Cozy Bay, we weren't even the first to arrive. Needless to say, we did have maps and compasses, etc., to guide us where to go and things like that. But my mandate, or my task given to me, was that when we arrive in Cozy Bay, I would radio in to Bloemfontein to tell them that we've arrived, and then they would dispatch the necessary to bring us back. My goodness, 2 groups didn't arrive. we agreed that we'll wait another 10 hours for them to show. Maybe they just stuck somewhere. And then we agreed, no, I have to contact Bloem and explain the situation. So set up the radio, and thank God it worked, and made contact with Bloemfontein, explained to them what was happening. And they just says, no, go fetch them, go find them. So they expected all of us that were there, the rest of us, to go back and find them. And then we had to report at Josini Dam, and we also had a time limit to do that. So we start making our way back. But now we're hungry. We still haven't, and we were hoping they would drop supplies, but nothing. So we fished in the cozy, we waited for the tide to come in, and fished with hand grenades. So we could pick the size of fish we wanted. And there we did find some fresh water, and we made our way back to Josini Dam, and we obviously got back to Josini Dam much faster than going to Cozy Bay. But it took me some effort to get the team to come back. They were almost revolting, the guys, because of this, and they were hungry, tired. And the worst thing that happened to us, we all ended up with malaria. We all had runny tummies, etc., because of and obviously the mosquitoes were prevalent there. But what happened was and I was quite proud about that too, my effort in keeping the guys together, keeping them motivated, keeping them going, earned me my corporal stripes. And I was so proud of that, because being a corporal with wings, my goodness, women like that. But training continued, and I must admit that being an NCO gave you quite a lot of privileges in Rooiplaas at the Paravats, because I could eat with the officers. So it was sort of, and you got served, it was quite a privilege. So anyway, we then realized that there was something going. We still did a little bits of training, but there was a huge inquiry into the shenanigans at going to Cozy Bay, because a lot of the guys actually buried their ammo, the additional weight. And we only discovered that when we got back to Bloemfontein. And one of the craziest stories, we've now come back and we are exhausted, but now we're in the showers at the Parachute Battalion. And the guys are all naked, and each little shower's got its own cubicle thing, but no doors. And it's got a little, almost like a foot bath. And now we're washing our socks and our clothes in the shower. And this one guy, his name was Swanepoel, comes to me with a hand grenade. And he's loud now. He says, "Corporal, how do you get the pin back into the hand grenade?" So I said, "I don't know. Take it somewhere else." So he says, "I can't get it back." So he says, "Corporal, you try." And he gave me the hand grenade, and obviously the pin comes off and makes a very distinct sound. But he had removed the innards of the back, so it didn't explode, if you understand. But we cleared that bathroom within seconds after hearing that distinct sound of the hand grenade releasing the pin. But it was a blank, so to speak. But that's the kind of dramas we went through, but it was quite fun. We knew that there was something happening, and we got word of it, obviously, more so me, because, and we realized that we were going to go to Katima Mulilo, the Caprivi. And we had our expectations of war and how we're going to fight and defend the country, which was normal. That's why we were at the army. But there was an embargo on military presence at the time, issued by the United Nations, and only police were entitled to be on the border or in the Caprivi. And we were all registered as policemen. The parats were then registered, and we were sworn in as policemen, and we were taken to Mapacha airstrip, Katima Mulilo, it's actually Katima Mulilo's official airport today, I see. And we, but from Mapacha, we were taken to Katima, and we were settling in there. Now, we then found, obviously, the police were there, and the air wing of the police were there with their helicopters, etc. And we, I was taken aback about, we were sleeping in tents, but we were sleeping on the floor. And what actually happened was, within the next 2 or 3 days, we obviously with the OC then, and anyway, I'll get to the names in a few minutes, but we made a list of what was genuinely required. And on the next flight out, 3 of us went back to Bloemfontein, and we got 3 trucks, and we loaded these trucks, Bedfords, with the requirements that we needed, and everything was laid on for us, by the way. And we went back, we drove back to Katima, but through Botswana up there. And it took us 4 days to get, and in fact, the whole exercise took us 5 days, which was not bad, considering the constraints, etc. But what was classic is our toilets those days we used long drops, and the long drops were covered with hessing bags to give some privacy, and but this was a public toilet that was quite classic. It was a toilet chopped out of the tree. And I do believe that you lived not 2 houses away from this long drop. And I'm talking to Koos now, but this toilet, this public toilet, was then part of the Caprivi district office that had their headquarters in Katima Mulilo. So a very interesting story around this toilet. But when we started settling ourselves in, the police presence was moving. They were slowly moving their forces out, and I think they were moving to Rundu or something like that. I'm not quite sure. But we had the luxury of bathing. We could bathe in the evenings after a hard day's work, and you'll see what we were achieving. And this was our bath exercise at every evening, and we would plunge into the mighty Zambezi River, but we had bodyguards that kept an eye for the crocodiles and more so the cobra snakes, and especially when the river was coming down in flood. The cobras would drift on the water, and they get nasty, those cobras. So that was our bath situation. And then we had to look at our brief, understand our brief. What were we expected to do in Katima Mulilo? And our CO in Katima, or we also called our camp Rooiplaas, oddly, for what, because it was what we had 2 COs that I can recall, Jan Breitenbach and Zeely. I remember Captain Zeely. And our brief was just simply this: protect Katima Mulilo. We had to make sure it was safe. So how did we go about this? This was quite an interesting task. This picture actually illustrates, we cut a clearing right around the town. And in the picture, you will see there's 2 little arrows. The one points to the right of the picture, and that is in fact a stronghold, or a stelling, we used to call it, a stronghold with sandbags, and we had floodlights in there that we could spot on it. And then further on the back, you'll see another arrow pointing down, and that was what we called the lookout tower, the watchtower. And obviously, there was communication between the two because there was direct, and we could give them FM radio so that they communicate. But we also connected all these key installations with telephones. This picture gives you a classic example of what I refer to as the stelling or the stronghold, and it's built out of sandbags. And there you can see the spotlight, and you'll see a little aerial on top here. And believe it or not, it's not, by the way, it's not a radio antenna. That is a lightning detector. That is the one that, and it's well earthed because Katima is known for its thunderstorms. So that was quite fun. And then the next picture shows a picture of the tower itself, one of the towers. We built two of these towers, and on the left of this tower you can see the actual lightning detector, you know, the one that will earth the lightning bolts. And these were quite, and you see it's quite difficult to climb, but you fortunately only need to do it once. And we did have facilities up here for the guys if they needed to go to the toilet. But the next picture shows the mighty Zambezi River, which is a spectacular sight. But the one thing that we never considered when we were installing these watchtowers, because the watchtowers were built on the banks of the Zambezi River, and we didn't realize that the Zambezi River floods its banks heavily. And yeah, you can see a picture of the tower where, and a classic story here with this tower is the hippos would find the tower quite a useful mechanism to scratch their backs or their hides, and it would shake that tower, and the guys would radio in or call in on the telephone to say, help, we've been attacked. But the end result was it was quite classic. And then the water, but the access road to these towers would change overnight. The one day it's a few meters water, and then the next day you've got, and then eventually we had to start using makoras, and I'm sure you're familiar with the makora, which is the cut out wooden tree that helps you paddle across, so to speak. But we also, in our task, in our effort, we had to build underground ammunition facility, storage facility, but like the stellings or the strongholds, but underground, also with sandbags. We created an access control point into Katima Mulilo, which the whole other areas that we cleared away was no man zones, so to speak. Some of the areas were mined, where we realized that there were potential areas of access. And we were also often used to run sorties. And it so reminded me of the Black Marai way back in my days, where you would go to a little village, you suspect that there's some unusual activities taking place, and then you would clean out the village of any unwanted elements. So in effect, what we were doing in Katima and in the Caprivi was, one, protecting the village, and needless to say, we had to stand guard. There were two guards, and they would stand guard, and we would swap them around. But our period, of course, I might be a little wrong here, but it was 8 hours shifts that the guys had, and there were 3 teams, and they had to swing around. And one of the most interesting, one of my first tasks as a signaller now, involved connecting all the key points in Katima to the headquarters. And that's one of the things that we went down to Bloemfontein to go and fetch, was a switchboard, the old plug-in switchboards that you would connect. And so somebody would ring in and you would answer, and they would say, can you please help? Our batteries run flat, or whatever the questions is. And and then they would transfer the call to me. So I would be connected to if it was a communications issue or whatever. But we also had to connect the other key installations in Katima, which was obviously the district office, the police station, the general dealer co-op shop environment, the doctor's house. Then there was, interesting enough, Wanella. Wanella was the mine recruiting officer. And Wanella still is operational, but it's called the Witwatersrand Native something. And then there was the mission school. And then, of course, our bunkers, our strongholds, and the watchtowers, and, of course, the access gate. So all these were coming to this one central in HQ, military. So, in effect, we applied a military takeover of Katima. If I can say it like that. But and then I was given the task, which I never realized what I was doing, but I had to cut the telephone lines. So those days it was still the old farm lines, the two lines that crossed the border into the neighboring countries. And we made sure that they couldn't use them, and we pulled out some of the poles, but we didn't want them to reconnect. And we dumped those rolls and rolls of barbed wire somewhere in Katima. I don't know where. And apparently they're worth money today, but let's not go there. And then one of the interesting aspects, and this next picture will just illustrate, I was also assigned as air traffic controller at Mapasha Airport. Because what happened was we introduced immediately on our arrival, we had to clear the runway for the aircraft to land. They didn't, if I say maybe, hell, we were lucky 3 a week, if that, most, but, and we loved the aircraft coming in because that means we were getting mail from home. And it would mean that there's some fresh supplies, etc., and some cold beers sometimes. But the just as a matter of interest, every letter that we wrote that was going to go home was edited. The CEO would read this, and with a Koki pen or some mechanism wipe out information that we were not allowed to share. Interesting scenario, but I became very popular with the pilots, and obviously we had to let the pilot know that the runway's clear, he can land. One, we would have cleared any elephants or warthogs that were running around on the runway, and we had the guys at safe intersections, and then of course for landmines, etc. So there we go. I proud to add to my resume that I was air traffic controller at Mapasha. I then, our time was running short on the border now, and our 9 months training was in December, considering we started early April, so just right 9 months. And we actually celebrated our 40 days in Katima on the border. But at this time, the word was going around that we could volunteer for an extra 3 months military training in exchange for doing 3-week camps every year. And that sounded attractive to me, but hell, we were just keen to get back to civil life. But we were approached. And a few of us were asked if we wouldn't mind volunteering for an extra 3 months, and we did. And there were 12 of us. In fact, it wasn't 12; we were 11, and we called ourselves the Dirty Dozen. And somewhere, I know that the name of the Dirty Dozen plays a big role in the recce's, but I'm going to get to this right now because this is a very important part of my career. wanted to help and participate, and they brought us in to this, and by then our guys had left. The guys that didn't want to volunteer for extra 3 months duty, all right, they went back to Bloemfontein and back into civil life, not civil life, civil life. We helped with a handover to the new guys that came in. And if I'm not mistaken, these guys that came in that replaced our troops, because it happened on the same flight that brought them in, took our guys out. I hope that makes sense. And these guys, what was fascinating to me is that when they embarked from the aircraft, they were on the ready, in positions to attack the enemy, exactly like we were when we got there. But it's just the part of the course. So when they arrived, the Dirty Dozen, we were there. We were I handed over all my functions of battery charging and all the other things now to them. And we were sort of wondering what's going to happen to us now, because now suddenly we didn't have to stand guard or worry about the gate. And the end result is they used us as on what we called we were used as intel operators, the word, and probably the word recce sounds more fitting, but all we did is we went in, maximum 3 of us at a time, and we were either dropped near the area where they expected or suspected some activity was happening, or we had to go and find the activity. And some of these outings would take us 2 weeks, a week, depending on how far and where. And we would then get back, report to the authorities, and let them know that this is what we found. And obviously, I would also radio back the information if needed, if it was urgent. But we try to avoid radio contact to the best of our ability. When there would always be 6 of us at the base. Never would they send all of us out at the same time. We were, and I need to express this very clearly, we were never sent into Angola to attack. There was no need for it. All we were asked to do is get information about what's going on and get back. And I personally only once managed to get away from an incident where they nearly detected us. Like I'm talking about the other guys. And one of the things I say is the one thing that makes you a true soldier is when the first bullet goes past your head. You either dig a hole or you shoot back. But that wasn't our intention. We just made sure that we got away without leaving any traces of who was there and what we were doing. But we were, and this is quite an interesting story, and it's that sort of scenario stuck with us for a while. People were so scared of us. When we walked into the mess hall, I'm talking about in Katima now, we walked into the mess hall, the other troops that were sitting there would get up and leave. And we were wondering whether we were just smelly, because yes, we wouldn't go onto a mission unless we smelled. And also we didn't have to worry about haircuts, shaving, etc. That we had freedom for that. So on the one hand, it was bliss, and on the other hand, and I'm not going to go into too much detail, but what happened was went out at around March. Our time was up. Our 3-month extra training was up. Now we wanted to go home. But first we were sent to Waterkloof. We went to Pretoria. And we were debriefed there quite extensively for about 3 days, individually. They almost interrogated us and got a lot of information. But again, in Bloemfontein, we get back there. Now the new paravats are busy training. We arrived there, and the word has already got out that we're coming there. My God, same scenario. I believe that we were sick, that we had an illness that these guys didn't. But we were then taken on a whirlwind. It was in out, flash things happening, and we were taken to Oudtshoorn. Again, we were debriefed in Oudtshoorn, and then we were taken to Durban. And I remember we ended up in the Bluff. And we were, again, there we had to do debriefing, inform what we did, how we did it, what made us survive, etc. And it was fascinating. At least when we did go on these trips, we didn't receive just one ration pack. But we also had we had food that wasn't from South Africa. It was somewhere else. But back at Rooiplaas, the other guys spent time catching up on their jump average. And I need to just make mention of this. I ended up with 49 jumps in my military period. But some of the guys, and especially when we were on the border, we were deprived of the opportunity of jumping. We did, but you jumped out of helicopters, and some of them were altitude jumps, etc. But I'm not going to go into detail with that. There's no need for it. But the guys were sent on, and some of them the guys did up to 3 jumps a day, and that was quite heavy. It's any time when you jump out of an aeroplane, it drains you. But the reason for them is to get their averages up. But now, I had quite a healthy average because of my glamour jumps. If you may recall, I told you about going to all these different issues and places where you could jump, and the girls like it. So, and then I left Bloemfontein on the 29th of April, 1969. And I believe that my days were over, but it didn't quite work out. So in Joburg, when I got back, I was soon contacted by a group that named themselves the Scorpions. And this group was based in Mill Park, there by Joburg Park, in the military grounds there. And that led to a couple of excursions, which I don't see the need for going into detail. But we were faced with this dilemma: were we police or were we army? And that was quite problematic for us. And I got married in 1973, and did probably 2 more missions, if I can call them that, and called it a day. One of the missions that we went of, and we vehemently opposed to it, was we were sent to Cahora Bassa Dam in Mozambique. Now, there's always been a debate about whether it's Cahora Bassa or Cabora Bassa, but whichever, it was the dam that they were busy building. And we looked at this lot and we said, no, we're not bodyguards, because that was what they were actually looking for. And they needed mercenaries to do that, not intelligence seekers. So the end result is I did serve and enjoyed and came out of it whole, thank God, and am proud to have been associated. But it was one of the issues I never talked about. I didn't see the need for it, because we had a pact between us, especially the dirty dozen that I'm talking about, that whatever we do, we're not going to talk about. And I think I was close enough in this presentation or this discussion to say, I didn't talk about it. Be blessed, Chris.
Hello everyone, it's Chris here. I want to inform you that this video is sponsored by George and James, or GMJ. It's an author which is very well known to me. Some of his books are here behind me. There are many, many more. I believe there's about 52, 53 books in the series. And they all deal with the things which you talk about on legacy. In fact, it is astonishing to me that most of what you hear about in legacy, especially with special forces, is already in those books when they were written before legacy existed. And so they cross-reference to each other. Last time there was an update and the characters would talk about certain things. I would say, well, go to Legacy Conversation and you'll find so-and-so talking about this very incident. Or you will find out that this and this and this. So it's very realistic. Some of them are non-fiction. They don't pretend to be fiction. The other ones are fiction, the majority. But as many people will tell you, there's no way in the world you're going to know whether you read fiction or not, because the history in them, the weapons, the techniques, the quotes, everything is totally 100% correct and can be traced back to the original sources. So they're very different. So should you be interested in assisting this channel, I would suggest, besides joining the Patreons, which is only $5 a month, kindly consider to buy one of these books. They're all in audio now. Some of them are in South Africa. You have to go to the website to see. All of them are in paper and all of them are in Kindle. So they are available. They are about the South African sub-Sahara type of environment. They're modern books. I thoroughly enjoyed them, and so did many of us. And the money which we make from these books all come back to the channel. It supports the channel. If you love history, you love the military type of history, love espionage, counter-espionage, you know, the light in the shadows, then you're going to learn a lot of things here because these books are really different. And that's it. I will leave the links in the description. I'll also leave a link here for the website. Please go there and see if you would be interested. And that's it. Let us go back to the video. Thank you. I have to say, I was listening here, of course, very, very closely. What a fascinating story. How many of the dirty dozen is still alive?
I got no idea, Chris. We after, and then again, I just need to mention the missions that we went on, or the excursions that we went on, or the requests that we were given. Again, only 2 or 3 of us. And on many occasions, you would meet up with guys that weren't of the dirty dozen, so to speak. Others, and most of them were ex-police. So, and you were selected for what you were going to do. They knew exactly what they needed. And then they made their selection. And yeah, there were a lot of things going on there which the people don't know about. And that's why we're so lucky to speak to you. But there's something else which I want to ask you about. We've had people on legacy before we come out of the orphanage. And they said to me off the record, and I don't know if you're aware of this or if it's true, that's why I'm asking you, is that in South Africa, if you're in an orphanage and you turn 18 years old, you are sort of kicked out. And I know that somebody told me it's still like that today. And you can imagine the harm which is done if a young woman of 18 is suddenly kicked basically into the streets as well as a young lad. Is that true? Is there any truth in that? Chris, no, what I can say is that when I left the orphanage, they made sure that I was going to go into a job, and they made sure that I had some money and some clothing. So it wasn't as if I was just said bye, go. Didn't work that way. And I know for a fact that many years thereafter, I've stayed in contact with the orphanage, and the same principle applied. I just never finished. I was supposed to go and do something that the orphanage had organized. Well, I mentioned the fact that I was, I received a bursary to go and study in Bloemfontein to become a teacher, but I turned it down because I was keen to go to the army first. I didn't want to study and then go to the army. I was keen to go to the army, but there was no doubt that we were just kicked out. I don't know of stories where the guys were just kicked out, but the orphanage did prepare me for the army. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I was astonished when I got to basics, and there were some lads who couldn't make their beds, and they couldn't iron, and they obviously expected the maid to clean behind them. And man, they suffered. I really think when moms did them in there, they did not prepare them. But talking about preparing, I've heard that the paratroopers in your days, I don't know if it's still in later years, also had like a bit of a boxing matches going there, where you had to sort of swim as part of one of the tests. Is that correct?
Yes. No, quite right. No, there was a number of reasons for that, and one obviously is to see whether you can stand up for yourself, and because only one of the two is going to win, and the other side was to see, can you take a punch, and that was the and I was never a big fan of boxing, but it wasn't a test. If you had to do it, but it wasn't the winner makes it. There was no such thing. If I'm clear on that one, but it was a test. Not all the tests that we did. I'm talking about the different, like for example, the obstacle course was one of the tests, the whole obstacle course, but you were given ample time to do it. It wasn't as if. And so you couldn't fail, if that makes sense. So, but
well, I'm sure that stood you to good state, because I think Saki Mare, legendary, I think RSM of Parachute Battalion, later a commander, actually became a colonel. He became an officer. Right in the beginning of Legacy, he started talking to us in Afrikaans. And he explained how it worked in live ever. The paratrooper don't get second ever. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. Doesn't matter what you do, you win. And but in these other wankers try to sit at your seat, where the rondies or wherever, you have to sort of a duty upon you to make sure that the guy understands life afterwards. And from my own time in Bloemfontein, I have to say that the red berets of paratroopers, something of a target for the rest of the guys, and vice versa. Was that ongoing in your time as well, the esprit de corps?
Constantly. Our motto was Vastbyt. That was besides the ex alto vintimus, which is we attack from above, but was Vastbyt. And for example, when we did our first night jump, our last qualifying jump, number 8th jump, you do 8 jumps to qualify, and on your 8th jump it's at night and it's dark, and what they do is they put the lights on in the aircraft to bright in the back. So now you're in this light, and then suddenly you're out in the dark, and you only got a few seconds before you land. And what worked for me is, as I was coming down, I wasn't sure how, is another 10 meters or is it another 100 meters? And all I did is I screamed out, I said, Vastbyt, and about 6 guys answered, and I knew exactly where I was. So sometimes you just got to use your kop.
Were you guys ever doing water jumps as well in those days?
Yes, we did. I did 2, but not part of my not part of the qualifying jumps. It was other jumps, other practice jumps, etc. And we also did quite heavy. I did quite a few jumps with full kit, where you got to struggle. You know, you walk like a bear. And two of them were from the back of Hercules, you know, out the back of the flap. And but it's fun. And unfortunately, of course, after the first jump, you start losing the fear. But I maintain, and anybody can tell me what yes or no, but every exit you make from the aircraft, there's butterflies in your stomach. And I maintain that the day you lose those butterflies, you must stop jumping.
Yeah, it's not natural, you know. It's a very unnatural act to get out of a working aircraft. But I suppose at that stage, there's no chance of you refusing to jump. I've absolutely never heard of that. I know it happened once with a recce where a Rhodesian refused to jump operationally. Have you ever heard of any paratrooper refusing to jump?
In training, in our 8 jump, we had one guy that on his first jump couldn't. He got to the door and it's voluntary. They don't kick you out. There's no such thing. Not that I know of. But what they do is then the dispatcher then just slides you past to his back. And then, so the rest can jump. Because one of the biggest problems with exiting like that is getting what we refer to as the strop burn. Is when you jump out and you jump over somebody else's rig line or his strop, the one that opens his parachute. And it actually cuts your throat. It looks as though your throat's been cut. I never had one of those before, but you know, there's so many stories that I can tell you about Roman candles, for example. And that's when you exit the aircraft incorrectly, then you go into a spin. Now your parachute's not spinning, but you're spinning, and your rig lines just turn up. And now you've got to get rid of that Roman candle so that you can land properly. So that's quite fun. You've got to think off your feet. But I always used to maintain that I'm talking about these. By the time you see the back wheel of the aircraft go over you, then you know that you're getting over this issue. And that takes about 4 jumps. Then you start seeing the tail end of the aircraft going over. So interesting.
Does the words hook up bring special memories to you?
Oh, yes. No, action stations. It all starts with action stations. But I need to express this, that in the aircraft itself, you don't hear that. The doors open and the aircraft is noisy. Those, especially the Dakotas, they were noisy things. But you would read, because they would give you signs with their hands, and they'll say action stations, and then they'll say hook up, and you can actually read the lips, but you can't hear anything. And then once you check, and then you check the guy in front of you, and you turn around, he checks you, and then you slap each other on the shoulder, 1 okay, 2 okay, and it goes down to the dispatcher, and stick okay, and then you get the command, come closer, and we watch the light. And that's where I saw the time of my first jump. And it's the green light will go on, stand in the door, go. And, well, our jump, just as a matter of interest, when we did our first jump, our stick, Kitchener's stick, was selected to go first. I don't know why, but he was a legend himself. But we went first, and then myself and Piet Cronje were selected to jump first, because our first jump, you jump two at a time, because they spot and look and make sure that you do everything correct from the bottom, etc. And then the plane will just circulate and then come with the next 2 and the next 2. So Cronje and I had the option of deciding who's going to jump first. So we flashed a coin, and I lost, which means he had to jump first. And he jumped first. And I always maintain, if he wasn't in front of me, I wouldn't have jumped. And he means if I wasn't behind him, he wouldn't have jumped. But we became big buddies for a long time. But
Isn't it amazing? I was just thinking, you're talking about something which happened 56 years ago. Or is it that much? My maps are very bad. 68 till about now. Well, close to that. So it's amazing to me the training that you can still repeat all the commands, you know, of standing up, hooking up, pulling the, you know,
that was, Chris, that was bounced into you. By the way, I can't remember leaving the aircraft on my first jump, but I did everything perfectly. And the next minute, and I actually landed in a road, which is not, it's the hardest landing, they say. But I landed on the dirt road. And the next, I remember from seeing the time until I was jumping up and down saying, I'm alive, I'm alive. Couple of seconds, but amazing. It's, yes, but you were drilled into every aspect, kicking out of your seat strap at the bottom, making sure that this is done, look left, look right. No, amazing.
I want to take you to something else. When you're in the Caribbean, you're using these long drops. There might be some people here, especially the youth, who don't quite understand what we mean with go-karts and long drops. So I wonder if you can explain, and also the most essential part, don't drop a cigarette butt into that hole after you done the number 2.
We had, what we did is we had 2, one, you got, obviously, if you go to the toilet, you got a number 1 or number 2. So for the number 1, we had pipes into the ground that you would, and that just disappears because, you know, there's no rocks in Katima. They say if you find a rock in Katima, you're very rich. So we, that's how we would handle number 1. But number 2, what we did is we obviously dug the hole, and then we had some contraption. We used a wooden bucket thing that would fit on top of the hole, and that was then a typical long drop. But you had to be careful what you dispensed into that, especially nicotine. That would have an impact on the fermentation. But you would quickly smell it if there was something amiss. And then you just fall in the hole and dig another one because it was easy to dig. There's lots of soft sand there. And we had quite some useful earth-moving equipment there that was used to build the Mapacha airport, because the airport was finished in 66, which was a year later we arrived. So the belly scrapers and bulldozers, D9s, those kind of things were still hanging around there, which is what we used to do the clearing of the bush around Katima, is those equipment.
I have to say, when I was at school at Katima Mulilo, and if you were well behaved, like I was, then the teacher would actually give you a stone, like a clip, and you could play with it. You could keep it for an hour or so. You can throw it around, but you had to give it back. It was like your special award, man, for having a good attitude. You could keep a little stone. But things were heating up in Katima Mulilo from those years onwards till about 78, with a big attack taking place there where we lost 10 men. And landmines was a serious damn problem there, as well as the roads. I mean, the roads were not that good. I mean, they were actually non-existent, most of them. Can you tell me about the roads and the landmine threat?
Well, there weren't many roads, that I can tell you. You know, in the town, in the little village, and it was quite a spread out town, and most of the roads were almost, I would say, tracks, farm tracks. The road from Katima to Mapacha Airport, in effect, what they did is they put a D8 or a D9 into gear, and they just plowed a road to the airport. And I'll never forget that. What happened was there was one little kink in the road, a little a low spot in the road. And every night it would rain in Katima like clockwork. And that little dip in the road was the ideal playing ground for the elephants. They loved it because they could come and play in the water. And we would have to divert a sort of a bend around the water hole now that was caused by the rain. And that was, but the roads were in a terrible state. But fortunately, we had equipment to clear the road. And we had to, in any event, clear it on a regular basis just to make sure there's no mines. A classic story, when we arrived in Katima with the Bedfords, while we were loading the Bedfords in Bloemfontein, we painted skull and crossbones on the doors of the Bedfords. And then we drove it through. But when we got to Katima, the first thing they did is take the doors off. No vehicle was allowed to have doors. So it was, I just thought that was, we did so much effort to put the skull and crossbones, and they take the doors off. But
well, it's a warm place, Katima. I also remember the sonbeesties going non-stop almost there at one stage. And then, of course, when the river comes down, that river becomes 5 times as wide as it used to be. And then it's a serious thing because the crocodiles, the crocodiles are something else. They're quite big. I don't know if you guys, when you were swimming there, were aware of those crocodiles, mensvreters, around you.
We, just as a matter of interest, what we did, because we bathed every night in the Zambezi, and we had a nice special little, I won't say it's a beach because it was but it was a safe one, because the crocodile likes to actually, seldom he attacks you in the middle of the river, he'll attack you on the side. But what we did is we had guys that would stand watch with their rifles while you're swimming and keep an eye on anything. And then we had fresh meat, like a little duiker or something that we would have on standby, so that if we do see a croc, we would throw the duiker in, and that would distract the crocs while the guys get out. So that was just one of the things that I can remember. But one of the things that we also did is generating power was quite a requirement, so to speak. And we took one of the big, we managed to organize a big generator, and I put propellers on it, and we generated power. And I could put lights in the tents through the generator, 12 volt lights, but at least the guys had something they could read at night. So classic.
What is this interrogation course or phase you're talking about? What happened there?
Of course, we were select few, all right, weren't many, and we would split into 2 groups, and then the one would have to find the other, and then obviously the one was the enemy and the one that, and then when they found one, you were obviously given a brief of what's your mission or what you're going to do. And then it was up to the other team to try and get that information out of you. And host of things that they would do, you would be put into a drum, 44-gallon drum, in the heat, and just left there for a day. No sound, no nothing. That was hell. But I had to go through it once. And you start banging on the side of the sink to say, hey, did you guys forget about me? And they kept you like that for a few hours, and then they would say to you, okay, you're willing to talk? And you say, yes, just get me out here. And then when they get you out, you say, what am I supposed to tell you? But no, it was intense. There's nothing more beneficial than understanding what could happen. Then you make sure, if you know what's going to happen, you make sure you don't get caught. So
well, that brings me to my last question here. Are you allowed to defend yourself, not to be caught? I mean, can you swing and kick and bite and do what's necessary to escape?
Chris, that's why we were trained. You can. You're entitled to defend yourself. But, and I say this in a very odd way, the best line of defense is not to be caught. And it applies in life, doesn't it, to everything we do.
So if I can ask, what happened then after the army? What did you do further with your life?
I finished my contract because I went to a bank because the bank paid me while I was doing military training, which was quite useful. But I need to also just mention, we made a lot of money in the army. I received danger pay. I received my jumper's fee, and there was quite over and above. And we didn't need money to spend. You know, there was because everything was so cheap then. Anyway. But I got involved. With a contract which was quite interesting, not military-wise, but changing the petrol pumps in South Africa from gallons to liters. And unmarried youngster, my friend and I, Nick, very good friend of mine, we ended up traveling 360,000 kilometers in 18 months. Working on this contract. But there was a couple of teams doing it, but we traveled areas where nobody ever knew. And we ended up in then Southwest Africa. But we weren't allowed north of Grootfontein. We were quite pleased because that was now the war zone. Irrespective of the fact that I knew Katima was just around the corner and Rundu, but then I went into civil engineering, and I went into was quality assurance engineer at a couple of power stations, believe it or not, but not for Eskom. I wasn't working for Eskom, I was working for the contractor. And in fact, one of the power stations that I was involved in, which is Latabu Power Station, is one of the best performing power stations. And so my quality did add a bit of value there. And then I forfeited my commercial life for a lifestyle. And I helped develop the Featherbed Nature Reserve in Knysna. And that to me was incredible. It was fascinating. And I still love every minute that we spent there. It was a way of life. But then I moved in and got involved with NGOs, running civil organizations, and I started lecturing quality. I started lecturing strategic planning and getting involved with that, and did quite a number of courses throughout the continent, traveling Africa extensively. So that was fun. And then supposedly retired, and you won't believe, but what I do today is I write computer programs. Now that might sound fascinating, but I use MySQL, PHP as a coding platform, and I help digitize businesses to operate more successfully, because that's the only way to do things right. And so and it keeps my brain young. What can I say?
Yeah, that's most impressive. But you know, the one thing I like about us here at Legacy is we're not youngsters. I'm frequently younger than the people I speak to, almost always. And my wife has a saying that once you reach the age of 50, you have a story to tell. And more than that, you actually have advice to give, whether people want to follow it it's not your problem. So looking back now, if there's a youngster looking watching this, what advice do you have for people out there?
First, the greatest that I can share is live your dream. To me, that is the most essential element of life. Is we only live one life, and you've got to make the best of what you're doing. And I will always add on to that is the principle of paying forward. Don't ever live with that principle of pay me back, you owe me. Rather pay forward. I hope that helps, Chris.
That absolutely helps. And I must say, I really enjoyed this conversation. It was fantastic. And I hope that tiger here, the cat, didn't bother anybody. I have to say, he's sleeping like a baby here. And I sort of like a cat in the first few hours we've met. And as we say at Legacy, guys, please come and talk to us. Don't let your story go waste. It's important. Every one of you has a story. I mean, we've learned today about the time which many of us were just born or toddlers, we don't even know these things. We don't know about the Dirty Dozen or the paratroopers. We know about the Special Forces men who went with Colonel Breitenbach, the Dirty Dozen. But now it seems they were the Dirty Dozen before them even. And I don't know exactly where the movie comes in. I think that came in the 70s too. So you guys were the
Lee
first.
Marvin, 66.
66. Okay, so that's where the name comes from.
Yeah.
When men were
Lee
still...
Marvin, quite a few actors in that, well-known actors. Brilliant movie, though.
Yeah, it's a great movie. I think, there was very famous people there. So it just shows you guys, we're learning all these things, and there's wisdom here. So please come and talk to us. Don't feel that you don't have a story or man, no man, come and talk to us. Just get hold of me. You can ask Peter here. It's very easy to get hold of me. You write an email and I might even respond. And then you start talking and then you never stop talking and you become mates for life and you just carry on. And then that's a wonderful thing about Legacy. So let me say to you guys here, like we always do at the end, gentlemen, ladies, until we meet again, God bless.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.